Hi, what's up? I'm Channel Pup, the mascot for the level-headed fanboy, and today we'll be continuing with the review of Doctor Who's 60th anniversary. Just a reminder that, like most classic Who stories, this is a two-parter, so be sure to check out Part 1, which features my thoughts on Liberation of the Daleks, Destination Skaro, Tales of the TARDIS, and just a general overview of the Whoniverse under Russell T Davies. Now, of course, if you love Doctor Who, there is more Doctor Who content coming to this channel now, so be sure to subscribe for more in the near future, and if you are already a fan of mine, first of all, thanks. If there's any chance you'd be willing to extend your support, there is a link to my Patreon in the description below. It would be hugely appreciated, but nothing I take for granted. So for this part, we'll be reviewing the 60th anniversary specials, the Star Beast, the Wild Blue Yonder, the Giggle, as well as the Daleks in colour and the new version of An Adventure in Space and Time. So going chronologically in release order, let's start off with the Daleks in colour, a reimagining of Doctor Who's very first story. That's right, I said very first story. An unearthly child? Never heard of her. What are you talking about? Okay, but all joking aside, the Daleks is one of the most important Doctor Who stories ever made. It's the story that made Doctor Who catch on and propelled it into the pop culture stratosphere. The Daleks in colour is not just a colorization of the original story, this is that story cut down into a single 75-minute feature with reimagined music and audio by Mark Ayers, and new dialogue from the Daleks courtesy of Nick Briggs. This also isn't just a straight colorization either, as what we have here isn't how the story would have appeared were it shot in color. There's a lot more artistic license going on. So this reworking proved to be pretty divisive among fans, and I'll be blunt, I completely get why. I thought this was an interesting experimental piece, but I can't say in confidence that it actually works. It's a valiant effort that can best be described as a remix that feels like a very far cry from what the original intent was. This doesn't stand on its own 2 feet. What we have here is a Frankenstein's monster of different filmmaking philosophies haphazardly stitched together. If the original was a product of 1960s sci-fi, this feels like, well, remember when in Joss Whedon's Justice League, to inject more color into Zack Snyder's final battle footage, they just made the sky orange? This feels like that. That's not to say that the problems are in the visual department though, as the colorization is easily the strongest part of all this. This story does look good, if a little oversaturated in parts. I get the sense they were trying to go for a very Dalek Chronicles-esque comic booky sci-fi look, and this works fine. Visually, there is still a 1960s sensibility to this. It doesn't look very natural, but I think they use that to their advantage for the most part. The problems arise in 2 key areas, the editing and the audio. The editing is just... what fresh hell happened here? I said in my review of Tales of the TARDIS that cutting classic stories down was a good move to make them more accessible for newcomers. But I think this really needed to be more around 90 minutes rather than 75. It needs to be longer, that's for sure. There's absolutely no time to process anything. No time for anything to breathe, and it's incredibly choppy because of that. It hurtles to the end of its runtime in a way that feels like nothing that happened mattered. I feel like they may have added the countless flashbacks to attempt to mitigate this, as though whip-fast pacing was making it too difficult to take in any of the information. When we'd remember that information if it wasn't just being thrown at us in quick succession anyway, like tennis balls. This edit prioritizes cohesion and information over its pacing, basically just chucking scenarios and resolutions at the audience at 100 miles per hour. It all makes sense in a way that an equation does, but none of it matters in the way that a story should. There are also some visual decisions that I definitely feel miss the mark too. They've upgraded the Dalek gun effects to better match the modern death ray effects that Dalek guns have today, as opposed to looking like fire extinguishers. But when we first see Ian being paralyzed by the Daleks, it made so much sense for them to just stick with the practical gas effect rather than changing this to the laser that we know today. They're not killing him, they are administering a paralyzing agent. Modernizing this to look like a laser with the negative effects just downgrades the readability of this scene. Then there's the recut of the scene where the Doctor and friends attempt to escape the Dalek city, and it's now edited to feel like a heist montage, which is completely at odds with the style of the rest of the feature. The Daleks is a story that is fundamentally a piece of 1960s slow burn sci-fi, and this version has been recut into something that's trying to be a blockbuster war film, a heist movie, and I'd be fine with all of this were it shot and written to accommodate for that. I wrote an entire essay for university on how Sam Raimi traverses different genre conventions in the bank robbery scene of Spider-Man 2, which allows the scene to constantly refresh itself, but it works there because Spider-Man 2 is fundamentally a Raimi project, and that's what Raimi does. The Daleks was never intended to be this, and has been turned into this after the fact. This is a 175-minute slow-burn 60s sci-fi TV serial that's been reverse-engineered into a 75-minute feature that's trying to re-edit itself into various different genres, and it all feels incredibly against the will of the original vision. Then there's the audio. So Mark Ayer's new music is good in a vacuum. I don't take issue with the composition so much as how it's utilized. For one, the music of the original used radiophonic effects and orchestral music to create an eerie, mysterious feel, and some of that music is still present, but it's combined with Mark Ayers' score, which functions entirely differently on a fundamental level. Ayers' score is unapologetically energetic and brash, using synthesizers that wouldn't have been readily available in the 1960s. Again, this score is good, but far more befitting of a kinetic blockbuster, which the Daleks just isn't. It's not shot that way, even if you try to edit it that way. There's also a major difference in the music's attitude towards the Daleks. When this serial was made, the composers, the producers, the audience, nobody had any idea that the Daleks would go on to become what they have today. At the time, they were just these little Nazi allegory glup shitos. They didn't rob the Doctor of everything and everyone he held dear, there was no time war, the Doctor didn't loathe them as he does now. So the original Dalek serial treated the Daleks as mysterious. We don't truly know what these guys' intentions are, and the music matched that tone. Mark Ayers' score, though, views the Daleks through a far more modern perspective. It's less mysterious, more menacing. It's a theme that would fit a more modern Dalek story. This is all made worse by combining Mark Ayers' new music with the original score, which just functions entirely differently. And then, if there's not enough disconnect as is, nothing has been done, or seemingly nothing has been done, to adjust the quality discrepancy between the story's original audio and the new music and sound effects. So you've got the aged, softer audio of the episode itself, overlaid with crisp, high-fidelity music and sound effects. None of it sounds like it's been mixed properly either. Then it's made worse by the fact the music is so damn loud. Now, the music being loud, over-present, and intrusive in Doctor Who is nothing new, but holy mackerel, this is just screaming at you. It's actively distracting. I'm guessing this was perhaps done to disguise some areas where the original audio wasn't quite so seamlessly cleaned up and removed, but this feels more like lampshading the problem than fixing it. So how do you fix it? Well, you could just leave the audio alone. Just leave the entire damn thing alone, ideally. Or maybe you could just colorize the original without all this tampering. But okay, let's say you're endeavoring to do this very project as is. Well, you could try to reduce the quality of the new audio so at least it matches with the original. Or, you're gonna vomit, but use AI. AI can be great for cleaning things like audio that you can't really do without. There's been like 2 occasions on my YouTube channel where I haven't had access to my good microphone, so I've just had to use my onboard microphone and then upscale it using Adobe's AI podcast tool. Now, if they'd just done something like that to the episode's original audio, maybe it would have taken a couple of days to process, but it would sound a lot better. And again, I mean absolutely no disrespect to Mark Ayers. This music is really strong, and I'd love to hear him score a modern episode. But here, it just doesn't work. So overall, the Daleks in Color is an experimental piece and a valiant effort, but the end product is more comparable to the Joss Whedon cut of Justice League, where it's a pre-existing vision that's just been edited into oblivion to the point where it's barely recognizable. It's by no means as morally insidious as Joss Whedon's Justice League, but the end result is still a Frankenstein's monster in the same vein. The same overall beats of the original story are here, but in an attempt to trim off the fat, we've been left with a skeleton that has been covered in glitter and is now wearing a party hat. The Daleks in Color just doesn't work. It can really only be viewed as a piece of experimental art. With that, we move on to An Adventure in Space and Time, which was scheduled to air immediately after. But this wasn't just a rerun, this was a revised version. Now, An Adventure in Space and Time was easily my favorite aspect of the 50th anniversary, so this reprisal was a treat. The original was a somewhat cushioned account of Doctor Who's inception with a much more cuddly depiction of William Hartnell than the real deal ever was. But as a film, it was wonderful. It was just bursting with a genuine love and warmth towards the show. You could argue it's overly sentimental, but it succeeds in making me sentimental too, I guess, so as long as that feeling is shared by the audience, then hey, success. This updated version has been cut down somewhat, removing any and all allusions to an unearthly child due to the BBC losing the rights to that story, with them being revoked by the original writer Anthony Coburn's son in some bizarre revenge quest against the BBC for making Doctor Who woke or something. I don't know, the guy's clearly not well, nor is he very consistent. My advice is for the BBC to take him to Magaluf and get him laid, then he'll mellow out. Media preservation is incredibly important to me, so naturally this makes my blood boil, even though at the same time it's not a big deal to me personally, as an unearthly child is boring as hell, and the Daleks is honestly a much better entry point. But again, media preservation matters, and Doctor Who history has enough holes in it with all the stories that the BBC junked. We don't need another one. With that being said, An Adventure in Space and Time manages to stay pretty seamless, unlike that 75-minute recycled patchwork that aired before it. If it wasn't pointed out to me, I would not have even noticed that these scenes were missing. And then there's the ending. In the original ending, we get this metaphor as William Hartnell sees Matt Smith standing at the other end of the TARDIS console, smiling warmly and proudly at the show's future and legacy ahead of it. Matt Smith was obviously the current Doctor at the time, so this does date the original. Allegedly, Mark Gatiss wrote this scene with the intention of it being reworked for anniversaries to feature the current Doctor of the time. And they've done just that. This time, stood across the console from Hartnell is Ncuti Gatwa, meaning the first televised scene of him as the Doctor was in An Adventure in Space and Time. That's pretty wild. And in this brief moment with zero dialogue, Ncuti Gatwa already oozes charisma, adding his own flourishes and touches, giving his predecessor a confident and playful wink. Ncuti Gatwa is also much better composited into the scene than Matt Smith was, so there's an improvement here. Now, as excited as I was to see Ncuti Gatwa, we do have some slightly uncomfortable optics here, which could easily come across as disingenuous or dishonest. If William Hartnell looked into the future of Doctor Who and saw an openly queer black man as the Doctor, he wouldn't be smiling with pride and warmth. Now, trust me, that is not me taking a jab at Ncuti Gatwa. This is actually me taking a jab at William Hartnell. William Hartnell was not progressive in the slightest. He was a very backwards guy, even by the standards of the time. I'm not one for throwing people who lived long in the distant past under the bus due to today's perspectives, but even by the standards of the 1960s, William Hartnell was a racist. But at the same time, this is honoring a tradition laid down by the original version of this, and this scene was always strictly metaphorical. Is it lampshading? Absolutely. But did I get incredibly excited to get a glimpse of Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor? Oh, hell yeah, you bet your sweet bippy I did. And so that brings us to the main event.
Yo, Coach Brett here, interrupting the video for a little bit of movement. All right, guys, so we're gonna do a little thing called the couch stretch. So if you've got tight hips, maybe some hip tension, maybe you're going up the stairs and it doesn't feel that great, you're gonna wanna do this. So what you wanna do first is bring your foot around so that the top of your foot rests on whatever chair or couch that you have behind you. You're gonna wrap your leg around so that your knee is up. You want to tilt your butt in like you're driving it through your legs, and then Typically, this is where you'd want to stay. If you want a little bit more tension, you just drive your body forward a little bit more. Hope this helps.
Hey there, Coach Brett here with True Capacity, your path to a healthier you. And at True Capacity, we've got programs tailored specifically for you. It's a body weight program that all you need is just your body weight, a little determination. We've got a minimal equipment program where you don't really need anything, just the essentials. And then we also have a full gym access program where really the only thing you need is a gym membership and you're good to go. So let's embark on this journey together and click the link down below for more details. Thanks guys, excited to see you in there.
The specials, the transitionary stories that will usher in a new era of the show, beyond just the usual passover that was Russell T Davies to Stephen Moffat or Stephen Moffat to Chris Chibnall. We are starting with a brand new Season 1 all over again for Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson's first run, with Russell T Davies promising another major reimagining for his new era, with the specials serving as a finale to New Who as we know it. These specials serve as a 3-act structure. You've got the Star Beast, which serves to re-establish David Tennant's Doctor and Catherine Tate's Donna Noble, as the two are reunited for a rip-roaring adventure that's just quintessentially Doctor Who. So, you're Act 1, establishing everything the audience needs to know. Then with The Wild Blue Yonder, this is where we really explore and analyze these two characters, putting them to the ultimate test. It's a low point for both of them as they face their greatest fears. So, very much a second act. Then with The Giggle, we've got this bombastic climax to this story. The key conflicts set up in the Star Beast are then explored in The Wild Blue Yonder and then are resolved here in explosive fashion with lots of twists and turns. And in a way that an anniversary should, these episodes celebrate the past, present, and future. The Star Beast adapts a 4th Doctor comic book story of the same name, so you've got the past. The Wild Blue Yonder explores the aftermath of the Doctor's lingering trauma from the Flux event, so you've got the present. And The Giggle gives us the most elaborate and extensive introduction to the new Doctor that we've ever had, establishing everything that makes him different from the last. I mean, I guess The Giggle also explores the show's past a little bit by bringing back the Celestial Toymaker and treating us to some colorized flashbacks from the original story, but the episode's priority is clearly laying down the road for the next Doctor going forward. This was a very interesting approach to an anniversary special. It's not just a story where former Doctors appear, it's effectively a thematic summary of the show's past, present, and future purely through its subtext, and I really appreciate that. But of course, if you want all that fan service goodness, such as the past Doctor Who actors reprising their roles, you've got that with Tales of the TARDIS. Heck, we just had that with Power of the Doctor as well. And again, 60 is not a special birthday the way 50 is. 75? Sure, we allow all the old Doctors you can dust off, but for 60 I think we've got more than enough representation for the show's different eras across all of the media we've been treated to in 2023. So let's start off with the Star Beast, and this will likely be the longest review of the set, as I'll also be giving an overview of certain elements consistent with the other specials, i.e. the characters, opening titles, etc. So as I mentioned before, what we have here is an adaptation of the comic book story of the same name, in which an alien from outer space, the Meep, seemingly on the run from the Worth Warriors. God, that is Worth Warrior. Roth Warrior? Hard to say. Hard name. The Meep is the true villain here though, bent on global destruction and domination. The difference between this and the comic story though is of course that this adventure is experienced and informed by the 14th Doctor played by David Tennant and Donna Noble, as the Meep is discovered by Donna's daughter Rose. When the Doctor runs into Donna in Camden, he begins to question why the universe seems to be drawing him to Donna when he knows that if her memory of him is ever restored, she'll die. And that's compounded by the fact that the 14th Doctor shares a face with the 10th. That being said, there are some notable differences between the 14th and 10th Doctors. So the 10th Doctor was very much the bravado Doctor, always putting on that brave face, and he was also a Doctor that from time to time acted with his ego. He's arguably the least emotionally mature of any of the Doctors, as he effectively strung Martha Jones along and succumbed to his emotions and resentment before accepting his death. And as not an insult, this is what makes him the most compelling Doctor for a lot of people. These flaws make him more relatable. 14 is effectively 10, but matured. He's more emotionally candid now. He catches himself openly expressing love for Donna to Unit Scientific Advisor Shirley Bingham. And we get some far more tender moments later in the episode. But we also have a very interesting new dynamic at play here. a past Doctor returning with all the memories of the Doctors that came after him. We've got David Tennant's Doctor, but he's the same Doctor who rebooted the universe, revived Gallifrey, fought to the bitter end on Trenzalore, loved and lost Bill and Nardole, discovered she's the timeless child, experienced the Flux. This is such an interesting dynamic that we've not really explored in the show before. Now, perhaps the greatest strength of Russell T Davies as a Doctor Who writer has always been his world building and character writing. The companions were not just people who travelled with the Doctor, they were his friends, his loves, and they had families of their own. Russell T Davies liked to explore the world the companion leaves behind when they travel with the Doctor, and this is his greatest strength in the Star Beast once again. Donna Noble's family are wonderfully written and play a pivotal role in this story. Catching up with Donna, she's donated all of the lottery money that they were given by the Doctor to charity, yet she's not entirely sure why. While she's living a happy life with her husband Sean Temple and daughter Rose, she knows there's something missing. It's something she hasn't quite grasped for all these years since her memory was erased. Donna's daughter Rose makes different toys in a shed at the bottom of the Noble Temple household garden, of different creatures that she sells online. You might say she's a toy maker, and that's never brought up. She's also trans non-binary, so she relates to the Meep's feelings of being an outsider in this world and needing to stay hidden, something the Meep very much takes advantage of. Then we've got Sean Temple, who, simply put, is a king. Endlessly supportive towards Donna and Rose, but also serving as a fish out of water everyman in the adventure. Sylvia Noble also returns, and she's notorious as probably one of the worst supporting characters in Doctor Who, not from the standpoint of quality, she was always well written, but simply because she's subtly abusive towards Donna in Season 4, making it clear she's never satisfied with her daughter or the choices she's made. The last time the Doctor saw her, he put her in her place, and from there, combined with her being far more protective of Donna due to her vulnerability, Sylvia has come a long way. We do see that she is having some trouble wrangling the concept of Rose's transition, what the correct etiquette is, and she does make some mistakes along the way, but she isn't vilified for it by any means. It's all handled from a very compassionate perspective. There are, of course, some aspects of the old Sylvia still lingering, such as how she slaps the Doctor, where I am, surprised that we're still doing the whole female on male physical abuse played for laughs thing in 2023. Come on, Russell! You're supposed to be progressive. If the roles were reversed here, this would be considered an outrage. I get it. She's trying to protect her daughter. Well, that's all right then. It's also just kind of forced in there, though. The scene could have easily gone forward without this moment. Doctor Who writers, please listen to me here, alright? I may just be some ordinary schlub on YouTube, but if any of you are watching, please listen to me. Female on male violence is a thing. It can be triggering for some domestic abuse survivors, men. It still matters. And if you've got a moment in your script where you feel like you need to have an instance of female on male violence, just think about every other way that scene could be represented before resorting to that. If it truly needs it, because that's the tone of the story you're trying to tell, then go for it. But if it doesn't, if you could have something else in its place, go for that. This shouldn't still be a thing in 2023. It shouldn't have been a thing back in 2013. We also see the new sonic screwdriver in action, which wouldn't really be a talking point were it not for how differently this version of the device works. Rather than just pointing at something and have us take the Doctor's word for it that he can take its readings by looking at a metal stick, this sonic screwdriver can be used to literally draw up interfaces, screens, and in one instance, shields. It can also be used to interrupt the Roth Warrior's teleportation, and yeah, it does a lot of convenient stuff. It's a modern Doctor Who episode, go figure. I do prefer the presentation of what the screwdriver can do here, but this thing still does need nerfing. So the Meep uses the remains of the psychedelic sun to hypnotize the unit soldiers into doing their bidding and fight against the Roth Warriors. And so you've got the Warriors and the unit soldiers in just this all-out assault on the Noble household. There's a lot of really fun stuff here as the Doctor, the Noble family, and the Meep make their way through the neighborhood to evade the Roth Warriors until the Doctor realizes that something is very wrong, and that the Roth Warriors aren't quite as hostile as the Meep has led them to believe. We get a fun scene of the Doctor playing judge between the Roth and the Meep, before the Meep finally reveals themselves as a scenery-chomping, crazed villain. Miriam Margolyes is a lot of fun in the role and does a great job at both the butter wouldn't melt meep and the beep of all meeps, the Most High. I must sound like a crazy person to my neighbors right now. Now, of course, the culmination of this episode is the Doctor being backed into a corner by the meep, forced into restoring Donna's memories to save the world. But of course, she's got the meta-crisis, the mind of a Time Lord inside her head, so the second that's restored, it'll be far too much for her human form to comprehend, and it will destroy her. Now, the road to get to this point is perhaps just a little on the bumpy side. We've established that simply seeing the Doctor isn't necessarily enough, it's if she remembers him that the meta-crisis reactivates, and there is a line of dialogue between the Doctor and Sylvia to establish that. But it isn't clear what triggers her memory. Aliens are in the street, there's a meep in her garden shed, and that's one thing, but then the Doctor is just straight up stating that he has two hearts around her, asking her to hold the sonic screwdriver, and so it goes, after spending the first 20 minutes of the episode explaining to Shirley Bingham that he can never see her again. We are starting with an assertion of stakes that the Doctor seemingly ignores. The third act of the episode then reveals that there's a code combination similar to the Winter Soldier that reawakens the meta-crisis in her head. But hang on. Seeing Sean and Sylvia turn into the Master in the End of Time caused the meta-crisis to temporarily restore. So how exactly does this work? And why do all the other characters try to shield Donna from any and all alien occurrences? What we have here is effectively Russell T Davies rewriting the rules of his own plot device over a decade after the fact in order to accommodate for this new story and give Donna a happy ending. But it does reek a little of the story eating its cake and having it. By the way, that's the correct way to say the term, don't correct me. So how is this all resolved then? Well, it transpires that Donna is now able to handle the meta-crisis, as when she gave birth to Rose, it split the meta-crisis in two, and now they share that power. I've seen some folks call this a Deus Ex Machina, but to be honest, I think this is a brilliant resolution. Rose is introduced early on in the story, and the hints of her sharing the meta-crisis are also dropped early on, including the toys that resemble different characters the Doctor has met in his travels, and the shed serving as a form of effigy of the TARDIS. This was genuinely really clever, and it means that while the Doctor is a part of Donna's happy ending, Rose is the one to thank for her survival. But here is where things get a bit more messy. So, the meta-crisis is binary. Two beings inside one head. But given that this was passed down to Rose, it's kinda implied that the meta-crisis had a role in her non-binary gender identity. Am I wrong there? Have I misread that? I hope I am, because that's weird. You don't need a plot reason to have a non-binary character. People identify as these different genders, or lack thereof, because it's who they are as far as they're concerned. Not because there's a Time Lord trying to bust out of their brains. And then because Rose is non-binary, she and Donna are able to let go of the Okay, we may as well just say it's magic at this point, but boy does this kind of stumble about. So here we are seeing a bit of a symptom of the late first Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who. Superb character writing that absolutely carries the entire experience, excellent world building, but convenient logistics that stumble their way into the storyline to resolve everything and put all the toys back in the box. And it's kinda sad to see gender identity treated as a resolution to an alien invasion, especially when the story doesn't ever explicitly state what Rose's gender identity actually is. Representation should just be representation, it shouldn't be a plot device. And then it gets awkwardly smug when Donna and Rose joke about how letting go of the meta-crisis is something no male-presenting Time Lord could ever understand. Which I kinda get in that the 10th Doctor was, as I said, very much the bravado Doctor. His flaws are by no means exclusive to the male gender, but they are more typically masculine traits. And I don't necessarily think this is a matter of gender favoritism. After all, the episode continues to assert that Donna, without the influence of the Doctor, can be pretty openly rude and shallow. She's a better person with him in her life. But it does strike me as a little performative, especially given what just transpired earlier. It's nowhere near as egregious as the 13th Doctor sending the Master to a concentration camp because of his newly regenerated ethnicity, or the optics of the fugitive Doctor, and it does at least try to say something positive in representing trans people. It just has some awkward mixed messages surrounding it in the subtext. Boy, I hope that's not going to become an ongoing issue. Also, can we talk for a second about that weird opening where the Doctor and Donna recap the events of Series 4 over a green screen? It doesn't really feel like part of the episode so much as it does just the characters literally standing before you and bringing you up to speed. I feel like this was maybe a BBC mandated thing given that this story does serve as a sequel to Series 4. However, the Doctor explained things pretty clearly in his scene with Shirley Bingham, in a way that feels far more organic, so I'm not sure why this is really here. The highlight of the episode for me is easily when the newly reunited Doctor and Donna explore the newly upgraded TARDIS for the first time with the intention of more travels and a chance to see Wilf in his assisted living. David Tennant and Catherine Tate are on absolute top form here, as the friendship between the two feels so tender and earnest. We also see the differences between 14 and 10 come to the forefront here, as the Doctor is openly candid about how broken he felt after losing Donna. I love the line where he just repeats how it killed him to lose her. Again, so tender. And a revisitation to this more humanized version of the character, now matured. I won't lie, I felt a little emotional. And the new TARDIS interior is absolutely gorgeous. We're back to the more white, sterile, space-agey interior with the simple roundels, except now it has so many ramps it feels like a skate park. This feels like an exaggerated update to the original 1960s interior, and the TARDIS has just never looked better. I'm also glad we're sticking with the exterior prop used in Chris Chibnall's era. This TARDIS is beautiful inside and out. I've also got to note that the effects, both CGI and practical, are superb. From the Meep themselves, who is a combination of CGI and animatronics, to the costumes of the Roth Warriors, to all the big explosions and devastations that are part of what makes Russell T Davies' Doctor Who so bombastic and fun. This show has never looked better, and that extends to the opening titles, which are more cinematic than ever before, as the TARDIS surfs through the time vortex and beyond. No longer just a single shot either, this cuts to different angles, giving us a better look at the TARDIS as it sweeps up the vapor of the time vortex in all of its neon colors. It really feels like we're being taken on a journey this time. This is probably the best the titles have ever looked, but there are some elements I'm not so fond of. For as expensive as this looks, the Doctor Who logo looks like a flat PNG, as this metallic logo doesn't really react to the lighting of the vortex. And then the way it transitions in looks like a very cheap stock transition. Though I do like how the TARDIS weaves under it, and the outward transition is also a lot better. Now, in the part 1 video, I did talk about Murray Gold's new theme for the show, how it debuted at the 60th anniversary concert, and how I wasn't overly thrilled about his return. Nothing personal, I just found his music was perhaps just a little too overstated. Well, the good news is, I get it now. So, the mix of the theme does still have all these orchestral flourishes that played at the 60th anniversary concert, but they're a little tidier and they now match the movements of the TARDIS in the vortex. This is an instance of where this version of the theme was clearly made to match the visuals, which is actually really dynamic. But this mix is also just much better. I've objected to the over-orchestration of the Doctor Who theme over the creative use of spookier, more uncanny sounds, and fortunately this version of the theme still incorporates the radiophonic sounds with a bass line that calls back to Delia Derbyshire's original theme for the show. The percussion instruments sound breathy and ethereal. There's even a little theremin in there. This is great. In fact, Murray Gold's score for this entire episode is a notable step up. There's still a tasteful use of leitmotifs, and alluding to the theme I Am the Doctor when the Dr. Donna returns was genius. But everything feels a bit more subtle now. The arrangements are less brass heavy, they are a little more characterized, a little more understated, they use more varied instruments. In other words, everything I like about Murray Gold is here, yet everything I've criticized is absent. For now, we shall see. But for now, with apologies to Murray Gold, obviously. I was pretty dazzled by the Star Beast. On first viewing, I was wowed by the return of Russell T Davies' character-centric writing style. The action beats, the production values, the tremendous performances, it's all here. The story of Donna being forced to repress this part of herself, her true self, for fear for her life, being underlined with a narrative about her trans daughter is a really cool idea, but it does tie itself in a few knots to get its point across and ends up diminishing its message somewhat. I do love this episode. It's a lot of things. It's a monumental upgrade from the more recent episodes, it's incredibly entertaining, but I acknowledge that it is also very, very flawed. With that, let's move on to the second of the specials, The Wild Blue Yonder. This episode was incredibly mysterious going into it, as absolutely nothing was revealed of the plot, the threat, the stakes, anything. Some speculated that the reason for this was because past Doctors would be reappearing in this one, but that's actually not the case. I think there was more footage from this special than we even realized in the trailers. It's just that for all we know it could have come from any episode, as this one is a character piece centered entirely on the Doctor and Donna, as they explore an abandoned space station at the edge of the universe which has been infiltrated by formless entities, able to take on the form of the other beings around them and take on the memories too. So the more the Doctor and Donna try to outsmart them and get to the bottom of the mystery, the more their enemies learn too. The TARDIS and sonic screwdriver are also out of service for the episode, after Donna spilled coffee on the TARDIS console, and the Doctor attempted to use the sonic screwdriver to repair the TARDIS. We get a bit more downtime for this episode. Time for the Doctor and Donna to catch up with each other as they try to figure out what's going on, and it's here where the Doctor truly starts processing his grief from the events of the Timeless Child and the Flux. We've got to return to the PTSD characterized Doctor, but this time rather than the Time War being the catalyst, it's the Flux event, and let me just say, what an inspired choice that was. We actually get answers as to what happened to so much of the universe afterwards, and yeah, it's just gone now. The worlds that were taken stayed gone. It's here where Donna learns just how exhausted the Doctor is at this point, and these interactions are easily the highlight of the episode. But don't let me undersell the threat here. So the previous captain of this space station ejected herself into space, killing herself in the process, so that these formless entities wouldn't be able to take advantage of her memories any longer. So now all they can do is skulk about. But the captain before her death set the ship for a very slow self-destruct. The TARDIS will inevitably rematerialize, repaired once that happens, but it's up to the Doctor and Donna to ensure that the entities cannot escape when this happens. So because the entities take on the form of the Doctor and Donna, it also means we have a story where we can never truly trust the two characters we have on screen, as at any point, they could just be who I've dubbed Rotcod and Anod. There's a lot of creepy body horror here too, as Rotcod and Anod try to perfect their forms, but often end up getting a part of the anatomy wrong, such as arms that are too long or the jaw falling off. The line about never being able to get the arms right did lead me to wonder if there was a little subtext here on AI art. Also, the effects department, both practical and CGI, are really showing off in this one. It's a simple story with a lot less moving pieces that harkens back to stories like Midnight and Heaven Sent, which are admittedly some of the best that the show has to offer. Once again though, it's scenes aboard the TARDIS at the very end that are my absolute favourite, where it sinks in for Donna just how wounded and tired this Doctor is. I love when she asks if he'll be okay and he just looks to the side and says he will be. It's spectacular acting nuance from David Tennant, avoiding eye contact in a moment of pure emotional vulnerability. And we of course get the ending where the Doctor and Donna are reunited with Wilf, who is as lovable as ever. You should have heard the gasp I let out when he appeared. I didn't gasp like that when I saw any old Doctors returning in Power or Day of the Doctor, that's for sure. But something's wrong. The entire world has gone mad and Wilf is holding down the fort to protect the family. We even get some pretty shocking imagery that calls back to 9/11 as a passenger plane crashes into Camden, exploding in the distance. This special is brilliant. Russell T. Davis' penchant for humanized characterization stands at the absolute forefront here. The concepts are exciting, the body horror is a welcome change of pace, and this episode is also home to some of the best music Murray Gold has ever composed for the show, especially the track where the drone exits the space station to look at it from the outside. There's a lot of existential dread to being at the edge of the universe, and the imagery and music for this is just incredible. Which then brings us to the finale, the giggle. So when the Doctor invoked a superstition at the edge of the universe in Wild Blue Yonder, it caused the Toymaker to return to this dimension, and he's chosen Earth as his new playground, where using the subliminal sound of his laughter in the very first television broadcast of Stooky Bill, he's hypnotized everyone in the world to believe they are right about everything. And the story equates this to madness, an elaborate game, a trap to lure in the Doctor. So following a meeting with UNIT, the Doctor travels back to Soho in 1925 to investigate, only to be trapped in the Toymaker's domain. He challenges the Toymaker to a game of cards, which the Toymaker then wins, but the Doctor persuades the Toymaker to go for best of 3, and so the Toymaker heads off to choose a new playground. 21st Century Earth, Unit HQ. But given that he played his first game with one Doctor, and his second game with this Doctor, he wants to play his next game with the new Doctor. And so he zaps the Doctor with Unit's cannon, forcing him into regeneration. But what he doesn't foresee is that the regeneration is going to work a little differently this time. So in this story, we've got a lot of allusions to the COVID-19 pandemic, everyone thinking that they are right, a disease that has effectively gripped the world, and Unit producing bracelet devices that can fix the people. And we get people who are anti these devices, this, that, and the other. It's very unsubtle. The idea of a mental disease spreading across the entire human population, causing absolutely everyone to go insane, is one hell of a concept. And then you could even have a cool moral dilemma here, in that, like Unit, a military organization, is trying to effectively control the mind. Is it worth accepting mind control just to stay sane? Well, that's actually not what the episode is about. The whole everyone going mad thing is really just the setup, it is never truly explored. We get a confrontation between the Doctor and one guy in the street, and that's about it. Which is a shame, because, like, Kate Lethbridge Stewart herself says this line of, like, how do we fight the human race? Something that is seen in all the trailers for this, and that doesn't really go anywhere. If everyone in the world went mad, imagine what could happen beyond just everyday people taking to the streets to cause anarchy. Imagine the effects this would have on the government. The episode does acknowledge this, but it doesn't explore it. But I did like Donna's comment about how nothing has truly changed in politics then. I mean, I suppose at the same time, like, how would the government even enforce anything? Like, what, are you gonna get the military out on them? No, because the military are now all gonna be these uber-free thinkers that think they're right too. And the more I think about that, the less of an interesting concept it becomes. So maybe it just being the setup is okay, I don't know. I still think there's more story to be told with this concept, but What we do get is a story where the Doctor has to face up to the consequences of his actions. He's the one responsible for the Toymaker entering this dimension, and the Toymaker makes sure that he recognizes his every failure with a puppet show devoted to Amy Pond, Clara, Bill, and the Flux. I've seen some folks saying that this was erasure of the 13th Doctor's fam, but I don't think these people are reading the scene correctly. This is referring to friends of the Doctor's that have died, and how the Doctor tries to rationalize these. I love how this calls out how these characters have effectively been killed off, even if the Doctor has tried to have them go with their own lives elsewhere. There's a few ways this can be read, some of which can be kinda ridiculing how previous writers have tried to put a happy spin on otherwise sad endings, but it's also a way of asserting that these characters and their deaths still matter. All of the stuff in the Toymaker's domain is really cool too, especially with Donna confronting Stooky Sue and the Stooky babies. But I also adored the shot of the giant Toymaker puppeting a marionette man. There's just a lot of cool visual moments in this one, and admittedly, yeah, cooler than the whole human race going mad. Especially when the Toymaker infiltrates the unit with a campy dance number, with all the unit soldiers just at his mercy. Neil Patrick Harris steals the show as the Toymaker, and that's something that needs to be said. We have had truly scene-stealing villains over the course of these 3 episodes. But like the Star Beast, we've got a series of incredibly convenient resolutions. So the Doctor doesn't regenerate after being shot by the Toymaker. He instead bi-generates. Oh, did I mention that Mel Bush is in this? Yeah, she works for Unit now. She's characterized really well here, better than before I'd say, and she's a great character. Her friendship with the Doctor is really warm. She kind of serves as someone who understands that the Doctor changes, in a similar way to how Donna does, but she's a little more intimately familiar with it, as Donna has only ever interacted with David Tennant's Doctors. I won't lie, Mel is just as shoehorned here as she is in my review, and she much more serves to set up a bigger role in the next season, but I must say I did greatly enjoy her character here. Sorry, anyway, the bi-generation. It starts off with the build-up to the usual regeneration, the Doctor preparing to say goodbye, and once again we see the difference between 10 and 14. Obviously, 10's regeneration is pretty iconic for better or for worse, as this was the first Doctor to truly fear death and love life. The brave face melted away as he stood and faced his end, after trying with everything he had to keep it at bay. He lamented to Wilf about how it felt like death and some new person goes sauntering away, And I get the sense that Russell T Davies regrets ending his first run on that note, as there's a number of lines here that completely do a 180 on 10's regeneration. The 14th Doctor, unlike 10, isn't regenerating alone. He's got Donna and Mel by his side. He tells Donna, it's not dying. And Mel tells the Doctor it doesn't matter who he regenerates into because every Doctor is fantastic, harkening back to 9's final words. There's a much warmer, less begrudging mentality towards regeneration this time, with 14's final words before the regeneration takes hold being allons-y, which is French for let's go. Once again, contradicting 10's I don't want to go final words. You know, this would have set us up for a beautiful and heart-wrenching send-off for the 14th Doctor, who I've never felt less ready to lose. But that's not what happened. This time the Doctor splits into two, and you might say I'm pretty split on this myself. Ain't I just the worst? So on one hand, Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor gets easily the best introduction any Doctor has ever had, getting, I want to say, 15 minutes of screen time as opposed to the usual few-second cliffhanger. And I'm immediately won over by Ncuti Gatwa's incredibly charming, charismatic, and confident Doctor, especially his interactions with Mel, who tells him he's beautiful. There are some nice details here, with the Doctors kind of dividing and sharing their outfit, although poor Ncuti Gatwa is without trousers for the entirety of the episode. That being said, he carries himself with so much confidence and charisma that it doesn't really matter. Apparently, Ncuti Gatwa without pants is more dignified than me in a three-piece suit, and that only makes me all the more excited for the 15th Doctor. 15 is by no means the problem here. Ncuti Gatwa is by no means the problem here. I love what we've seen so far, and I know that the role is in safe hands with him. But there's a lot that bugs me about this. So the bi-generation is really just the resolution to an ongoing mystery. Why did the 10th Doctor's face return? That feeds directly into the bi-generation. So the Doctor regenerated back into David Tennant so that he could find a home and retire. It was his body's way of telling him to find somewhere and settle down for a bit. Find Donna and make things right. But then of course he didn't get to truly do that because he was forced into regenerating by the Toymaker. So rather than doing that, his body decided to produce 15 and separate 14 so that 14 could actually go off and do what he's supposed to do. Heal himself so that 15 could flourish, free of the pain of yesterday. Now, regeneration is a Time Lord's body's way of healing itself, so this does actually make a lot of sense here. The 13th Doctor went through a lot. The Timeless Child, the Flux, it was a lot, all while carrying the traumas of previous Doctors with her. Regeneration is supposed to heal the Doctor, but the Doctor isn't just physically wounded, they are mentally wounded. So regenerating back into David Tennant was the Doctor's body's way of trying to heal the mind. And if David Tennant had just straight up regenerated into Ncuti Gatwa, carrying all that trauma and pain, that still wouldn't exactly be healing, so the bi-generation happened, giving 14 a chance to heal. It's elaborate, it's kinda beautiful, but again, it gets a bit muddy. Is it that the Doctor is just two beings coexisting in the same space now? I mean, technically, given that the Doctor is a time traveler, that is probably just happening anyways. But do we just have two current Doctors, but we're just focusing on one of them? I mean, it's kind of hinted that 14 will one day regenerate into 15 properly, but for now, as 15 tells 14, that he's only able to go on because 14 went on to fix himself. So the bi-generation is maybe just kind of prelude to regeneration, allowing 14 to finish what he needs to do before regenerating. I don't know, my brain's a pretzel. It is implied through dialogue, but it's not exactly explicit. The idea of the Doctor retiring as the story for the 60th anniversary is kind of beautiful though. It acknowledges how much ridiculous stuff happens on a regular basis in the larger-than-life modern iteration of Doctor Who, and alleviates that baggage for a clean slate. A reboot of sorts. It asserts that all of the stories of the modern run matter, but this is a fresh start. But here's where my problems really kind of begin. So the two Doctors challenge the Toymaker to a game of catch and defeat him by the pure fortunate happenstance that the Toymaker just happens to miss the ball. And he's defeated from there. Okay, so that's an anticlimax. Then when 14 tries to figure out how things will work with two Doctors living parallel lives, he tells 15 that he could never let go of the TARDIS because it would hurt. Now, given that this is a story about kind of processing that hurt rather than just ignoring it to jump off in a box and fly about, Kinda flies in the face of that when 15 tells him that he's literally won a prize, and uses the Toymaker's domain to just spawn in a new TARDIS for himself. Then when the Doctor goes to Donna's for a family dinner, it's then revealed that he's been traveling around with Rose. Yeah, the Doctor says he couldn't say goodbye to the TARDIS, because it would hurt. It's almost like that's character development or something. But okay, 14's got his own box for leisure, no longer saving the world. But are we forgetting that trouble just constantly finds the Doctor? So is he just gonna sit idly by when aliens attack, while he's on his retirement vacay? Leave it to the other one? The Doctor looks for adventure, he doesn't seek conquest. Russell T Davies has since said in Doctor Who Unleashed that the 14th Doctor is now parked, effectively. That the TARDIS just remains where it is while the Doctor retires in Paris. So first of all, what a hellhole! Paris? Have you actually been there? Sure, it's got a postcard, but... sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Secondly, I wish we'd actually had that in the episode. Even then, if we had a scene where the Doctor said goodbye to the TARDIS, it would have been one of the most memorable, heartbreaking scenes in the show's history. Oh, but it would hurt. Oh well, that's alright then. We were robbed, man. We were robbed of a great scene. Russell T Davies is a master of character writing and spectacle, but please, for the love of God, let things hurt. Have some discipline, my man. I know that this is meant to be an uplifting set of specials, but like they say in The Wild Blue Yonder, two things can be true at once. We should be able to have emotional moments in a run of episodes that is meant to heal us. Also, the line where Sylvia Noble tells Mel that she's family isn't earned in the slightest, as the two have shared absolutely zero screen time. Then we come to my other issue, the optics of this. Now, this isn't something I've just pulled out of my ass. I may not have a horse in the race, but I made sure to discuss this with a few folks that it may concern and done some research on it. I'm not saying I'm definitively right or anything, but I think I do have a case to make here. So this marks the second time an era of Doctor Who that's prided itself on being progressive has introduced us to the first Black Doctor, all while slapping a massive asterisk next to them. We couldn't possibly show the Doctor regenerating into a black man, no way. We'd have to literally split him in half first so that we could still keep the white one around before we possibly do something so bold. Is that projection? Is that a bad faith assumption? Yes, it is. But that is a message that this does send. Of course, bi-generation is a big part of this story, a very important part of this story. Should they have waited to have told this story with, I don't know, a white Doctor, or once they've had a scene of an existing white Doctor regenerating into a person of color? Should they have maybe just not cast Ncuti Gatwa this time? Well, there's no right or wrong way to really do that. It's more just that the optics are hard to ignore. Okay, one wrong thing would be not casting Ncuti Gatwa. I'm glad they've cast Ncuti Gatwa. This is a nuanced issue, folks. If you're allergic to nuance, leave. Because on one hand, this is just gas in the tank for grifters that already consider Ncuti Gatwa illegitimate as the Doctor for their own gross reasons. But now, he's quite literally another entity on screen. Oh, but there's lines that imply he's still the future self of 14. Oh, well, that's alright then. On the other hand, I get that you're probably never going to sway those individuals with any kind of sense or logic. There's a reason why they are the way they are. And I also appreciate that maybe Russell T Davies just doesn't care what those people think. The thing is, though, you don't want to risk validating them. I mean, at least what this does have over Chibnall's attempt at the first Black Doctor Who is that this time they're actually following it through, so that's alright then. But it does just kind of reek of, hey, we got the first Black Doctor, the white one is still around though. What I do like, and this is largely thanks to Ncuti Gatwa, is that Ncuti Gatwa does feel like the dominant Doctor as soon as he arrives. He absolutely steals the show, and that's saying a lot considering David Tennant is on screen there with him. He holds his own. Another issue, though, is that this does put David Tennant's Doctor on something of a pedestal. He's now the Doctor that got to stick around, maybe even the permanent Doctor. And no one incarnation of the character should ever be bigger than the concept of regeneration itself. We already pushed that with the Meta-Crisis Doctor, so it's weird that we're doing this again. The difference is, last time they deleted the scene where they implied that the Tennant clone would get his very own TARDIS. Probably because that would be fucking stupid. But then on the other hand, I like that we have a story that allows us to retire the modern New Who Doctor as we know him, truly committing to this new era. This also coincides nicely with Donna's story, splitting the meta-crisis in two. See what I mean when I said I was split on this? I've bi-opinionated, it seems. I am totally split on the giggle, and maybe that is to its credit. Maybe that's what I'm meant to feel, maybe that's by design. But from these 3 episodes, we can assess a fairly consistent problem between the first and third specials. Russell T Davies displays a lack of discipline. I was fine with them restoring Donna, giving her a happy ending, because it was 15 years after the fact. It was earned at this point. Keeping Tennant's Doctor around with his very own TARDIS? Not so much. Resolutions are convenient to a point they belittle the conflicts. I mean, the Toymaker was literally beaten because he couldn't catch a ball, for crying out loud. This feels like an overcorrection to me. End of Time, the ending to the first Russell T Davies era, yeah, it was overly bleak. It was overly melodramatic and indulgent. This trilogy here is perhaps trying just a bit too hard to heal. Granted, I'd rather that than the former. I mean, for what it's worth, it worked. I was feeling somewhat emotional watching these stories because I felt like I was healing. My Doctor was back and he got a happy ending with his best friend. Some of the best production values the show has ever had are here. And yes, these are, in my opinion, some of the best episodes in the past decade of Doctor Who. It's been a trying time. This trilogy of episodes is flawed, very flawed in parts. But these are more brief stumbles than they are issues that bring the entire thing down. It gets to where it needs to go, and I really like the stories they told here. My feelings towards this run of episodes are overall very, very positive. Despite their flaws, because, as they say in Wild Blue Yonder, 2 things can be true at once. And the Wild Blue Yonder ends up being the odd one out. The Wild Blue Yonder is by quite a wide margin the best of the trilogy, by far the least flawed. The tenderness between the Doctor and Donna is brought to the forefront, the conflict is spectacular, and David Tennant and Catherine Tate are electric in their dual roles as both the Doctor and Donna and Rockcod and Anod. And also in that episode, we don't have any optically awkward attempts at progressive storytelling. I'm fine with progressive storytelling. In fact, I think it's a good thing. I think Russell T Davies's ethical beliefs align pretty well with my own. But I also think execution is very important. And I don't think the Star Beast and the Giggle really nailed that. So, The Wild Blue Yonder is definitely the victor. It's also the most standalone story of the bunch. It's literally one of the strongest Doctor Who stories Russell T Davies has ever written. So, that's the lot. That's the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. Classic Who was brought to new audiences, modern Who was laid to rest, the Whoniverse begins! And I think we've left off on an overall strong note. The Star Beast and the Giggle aren't up there with Russell T Davies' best works, like The Parting of the Ways, but there's still a rip-roaring good time, with some truly iconic moments and some of the best characters. I adore the companion dynamic between the Doctor and Donna more than ever. The 14th Doctor is probably going to go down in history as one of the best Doctors we've ever had. It is soon enough to say that, right? He's just 10, but matured and improved, and I already love 10 as is. Most people did. I've got high hopes for the future, but one thing I'm definitely hoping for is that Russell T Davies will appoint a supervisor or consultant when it comes to progressive elements in the stories. If Davies wants to make his second era louder and more confident with its progressive themes, he's going to need to make sure he gets them right. And the handling of Rose and Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor's introductions made it very apparent that while Russell T Davies may be a great writer, while he may be very well-intentioned, he is also a 60-year-old man. That's not me saying he's losing his marbles or anything, but it will be more of a challenge for someone of that age to keep up with these aspects of the world than it is for someone younger and more wired into modern culture. And it's only showing more with him hinting at a potential guest appearance from J.K. Rowling Defender #1, Helena Bonham Carter, in the near future. And if she's playing a newly regenerated Missy, I swear to God. Oh yeah, that's right, they teased a Master return as well, didn't they? God, people tell me the Daleks need a rest. Mate, the Master needs a rest. And if I see him working with the Sidemen again, that won't be alright then. So there you go. I'm excited for Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, he's gonna be terrific. Odd choice with his Sonic gaming mouse, but it's fine. I'll probably be reviewing The Church on Ruby Road at a later date. For now, at least I know that whatever happens, I'll be getting a show with great characterization and exhilarating set pieces. So we're eating. So what do you guys think? Comment below, discuss, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit subscribe, hit the like button, And in the description below is the link to my Patreon page, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get your name in the credits of these videos. A special shout out goes to the patrons in the $10 tier, but please forgive me, I am still kind of recovering from my cold that I've had, so I don't want to be screaming your names out, but I guess I'll try and do something fun anyways. We've got Glad Goku, hope you stay glad, the devilishly handsome Daredeni, the cracking Kale Bennett, that Jordo with his magnificent artistic skill, Ken K of Warheads back again with the good takes, Super Hyper Mecha SP Mark II, guess it speaks for itself, that goes kinda hard, Cyrus the Skeptic, my dear friend and co-host over on the Sunset City podcast, and I can't think of a funny name, you think of one, okay, add Zinko. You've basically commented on every single video I've ever uploaded, which is very impressive, and you've never once creeped me out for it, so good on you for that. Glad you're done shitting in the McDonald's sinks. We've also got the beloved $5 tier Patreons, who are KLX, Richard Rogers, SSS06, Dazzle Fizzle, and Vera Wild. Thank you so much to all of you for your generosity. And to all of you at home, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and have a happy holidays. Kid, I love you. Get out.